Memberships are now live on this channel. Click the link in the description box to sign up to receive access to exclusive content and perks. Hi beautiful ladies, welcome back to my channel. Just wanted to thank you guys so much for engaging with my last video where I shared part 2 of my story, psychosis. I got over 20,000 views in 24 hours, which is crazy for a small channel like this. So to all of my OG subscribers, thank you so much for being with me since day one. And to all of my new subscribers, welcome. Thank you for your support. So I wanted to, I guess, do a part 3 to this story. Every time I'm preparing to put out content, there's always something more that comes up. So I wanted to talk today about the importance of not returning to your past. And I'm going to make reference to, I guess, what happened after I had left that church, as well as my encounter with a church sister, if you will, who also went to that church. So like 3 or 4 years after I had left that church, I had graduated from university by that time, and I went abroad for the summer after graduation to work, do an internship. And then I came back home and I got another job doing work for the city. And so it was so weird, but like I kind of went to this job fair and I met the hiring manager and she kind of pretty much hired me on the spot, which was crazy. At the time, I really had no idea what I wanted to do post graduation. I didn't know, like, it was a plan to go to law school, and so I was kind of actively pursuing that. But even then, that plan did not really seem, it didn't really sit well with me. But that's another story time. I know that some of you guys have requested a law school story time in response to the med school story time that I did, so I will do that later and talk about my experience. But there was all this confusion, which added to just the chronic stress and anxiety that I was experiencing. Because it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And anyone who knows, like, when you have no idea what you're going to do with your life, first of all, it causes a lot of distress internally because it's like, geez, man, like, I need to figure things out quickly. But also, like, you want to make money. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself where you can be settled in your career, make good money, and not have to worry about pivoting or changing your career 2, 3, 4 years later down the road. So that's the position that I was in. But I took the job because, I didn't want to be unemployed. And I said, you know what, I'll take this job. And while I'm working, I'll figure out my next move. So at the interview, I saw this woman. I hadn't seen her for like 3, 4 years. She came from that first crazy church that I went to, and she was kind of like a leader at the church. She wasn't like a pastor, but like she was like a part of the pastor's team, if that makes sense. So she saw me and she's like, "Oh, do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like long time no see." And I kind of just kept her at arm's length because I didn't know how she would receive me or like what her mentality was towards me, because a lot of people who left that first church, they were like, because they went through a lot of trauma with what happened at the church, a lot of people, like, they were super on edge. Some people were just not nice because of the trauma that they experienced. So when we randomly saw each other in the city, sometimes it's like, I don't know if it's safe to say hi to that person. I don't know if it's safe to engage with that person because, like, either, again, like they were super peeved and angry from that experience and they were healing from the trauma, or maybe they were, they got over it and, you were able to have a cordial relationship with that person. And luckily, she healed from the situation. She actually told me that she divorced her husband and she had no dealings with the husband and the secretary. And actually, the secretary that was having the affair with the pastor, that was her sister-in-law. So she was married to the secretary's brother. Um, it seems like that family just couldn't keep it in their pants because their relationship ended because he cheated on her, essentially. So, yeah, once we established that we both weren't weirdos, and she had even said to me that, like, she would encounter people from the church and she would get like offended that they wouldn't want to talk to her. And I'm like, I get where you're coming from, but I also get where they're coming from, because you know that people are still very much divided and traumatized by what happened. So people don't really know if it's safe to engage with the other person. She's like, yeah, that's true. And so, she knew everything that was going on. Honestly, she knew more about what was going on than me, because she was a part of the pastor's team and she was the sister-in-law of the secretary witch that was doing things to harm people. I don't know if she knows everything, but on the grand scheme of things, she knew a lot of what was going on. She knew that apparently there were a lot of affairs with the pastor's team members or the leadership team in the church, and the pastor knew about it and didn't say anything. And she didn't really see this as a problem. But I remember she kept on saying that God wanted us to go back to that church and finish the work that God started, quote unquote. And, at that time, I wasn't, as I mentioned before, like I was very much dealing with figuring out who I was, dealing with identity issues. But I had enough sense to know back then, I was like, nah, God does not want that church to reunite. Like that church completely dissolved. As I mentioned previously, it was shut down because the pastor refused to pay the rent because he was taking it and going on vacations and doing other things with the money. So there was that, the affairs, the citizenship scams, the dark arts. Like, why on earth would God ever want that to be rekindled? So she was like, yeah, God wants us to like start that church back up. And, you and I, we have a mandate to bring that back together. And I was like, nah, girl, maybe you have a mandate to go back, but I'm never going back to that place. Like, you're not going to catch me. And I kind of understand also where she was coming from, because the pastor was a father figure to many of the people who were there. Many of the people at that church had a lot of issues, and so they obviously went to church for spiritual care so that they can turn their lives around. He was a father figure, they kind of yearn for that support again. And this is very common with people who experience trauma, even though they know that what they went through was not cool, they were abused to some degree. A lot of them desire to go back to the situation that they were in, because that familiarity kind of serves as a comfort to them, especially when they're in a precarious situation presently where they have no idea what the future holds. They're kind of just living day by day, figuring things out, and they don't know what the future holds. And so the fear of the unknown is scary. So it's like, I'd much rather go back and deal with what I am used to. At least I know how to navigate that, than to move forward into uncertainty and potentially deal with more trauma, which is often not the case a lot of times. When you get away from traumatic environments and situations, you kind of almost set yourself up automatically to be on a better path. But because we're still very much looking at things from through a trauma lens, we tend to catastrophize and think that everything is going to be like what we came from or worse. And so we know that our life is going to continue to move. Like, we can't just stay put and do nothing. But again, we think that it's safer to go back to what we came from than to face the unknown of the future. And so I truly believe that that's what this young lady was dealing with, especially since she had lost a family member to gun violence during her time at the church. And so obviously that is a super, super traumatic thing for anyone to go through. And going through that and having a community of people supporting you, sending you their well wishes, giving you food, taking care of you, obviously that comfort remains in your mind. Those memories are like, I went through a really crappy time, but I found comfort in knowing that I had a community to support me. And so I recognized that, she wanted to return from a place of trauma. But again, even in my own state of chronic anxiety and depression, I realized that this is definitely not what God intended for us, because why would he want that mess to be revived? Why would he want people to go back to being abused and manipulated in his name? As I said in my previous video about religious psychosis, there are strong, heavy expectations that God places on religious leaders. And once you abuse that and you don't fall in line with those expectations, you as an individual have the right to step away from that church because that person's not even holding up their end of the contract with God. So why should you stick around? You have the right to protect yourself spiritually. So even then, I knew, like, no. So I say all this to say, even if you are in a situation where you feel like there's uncertainty, you're afraid of the future, maybe this year is going to, you can perceive, you know that there are challenges that you're going to experience that you've never experienced before, and you feel compelled to go back to the past, do not. Sometimes old friends will pop up randomly. Sometimes old lovers, old coworkers will pop up, especially opportunely when you are in a situation where you're trying to figure out if you should go left or right, and you think, oh, let me just rekindle the flame with so and so. 9 times out of 10, you're going to regret it. Sometimes God will bring people into your life from your past or just random people to sort of give you a hint or a tip as to where you're supposed to go, but that is based upon what God has already placed in your life, and that person's already giving you confirmation. They're not giving you you're not going to get any new revelations from people, contrary to popular belief in religious settings. God gives you everything that you need to know. You just have to listen. And a lot of people get led astray because they're not listening or they're choosing to ignore instruction, and they look to human beings to tell them if they should go left or right. Okay, so listen to the moral compass, that's inside of you. Maybe the moral compass is not saying go left or right. Maybe it's saying just stay put for now, just park it here for now. But if someone comes from your past into your life, if it's not confirmation from what God has already told you, then that is a distraction, and you need to just kindly and graciously let that person go along their way. Once you reach a new level energetically in life, reconnecting with your past can stunt your growth or distract you because you can be brought back to old habits and ways of thinking. And this is especially true if you are leveling up or you've overcome trauma and you are completely healed and a brand new person. A lot of times, spiritual forces will come at you at these opportune times to try to set you off course when you were doing well. And they will bring you back to your past again, whether it's from people or situations, so that you can revert and turn back to those things that you were healed and delivered from. So, if you intend on growing and leveling up and continuing to become the best version of yourself, you need to understand this principle and you need to respect it and not go back to your past, not go back to people. And it doesn't mean that, those people are bad or those places are bad. Those people and those places served a purpose to essentially get you to where you are today, including challenges, because it helps to either teach you or rewire your brain on things that you need to know to get to the point that you're at today. But staying and dwelling in the past is going to bring you back to the past. It's sort of like the crabs in a bucket mentality where you finally get to the top, and instead of you continuing to crawl out of the bucket, you kind of just stop there, and then someone who's beneath or someone from the past who's beneath you pulls you right back down, and then you have to start all over again. You cannot assume that people from your past have grown just because you have, because the fact of the matter is a lot of people do not grow. A lot of people just kind of get to a certain place in life. They achieve certain milestones that we are socially required to achieve, and then they kind of stop there. So you go to school, you graduate, maybe some people will go and get a bachelor's degree, graduate, start a job, start a family, and then that's it. And that's totally fine. If that's the path that you want to have for your life and you're happy with that and you are at peace and you're thriving, then cool. But for other people who have a little bit more of a growth mindset and we want to start businesses, we want to travel, We want to, I don't know, start foundations. Following a cookie cutter path is not going to work for you. And oftentimes, people who do follow the cookie cutter path, because they and the people around them believe that that is the only way to go. A lot of people with this mentality tend to believe that, yeah, there's only one acceptable way to live life. They will try to project that on you and be like, oh, why are you working 80 hours a week to start that business? Like, that's madness. Just get a 9 to 5 and be content with that. Or why are you choosing to get married later in life? Like, don't you know that your value in the dating market's going to decrease and your biological clock is ticking? You won't be able to have kids. Get married right out of university. Like, don't waste any time. Or why are you traveling? Don't you know that people don't like black exoticals? People in Europe, for example, don't like people with darker skin. And, you're just setting yourself up for embarrassment and failure. All of these mentalities, people will have these beliefs based on their own perceptions and lived experiences, and their lived experiences are valid, but just because it's valid for them doesn't mean that it's valid for you. Okay? You were placed on this earth to achieve different things. Each of us were placed on this earth to achieve different things. And sometimes people have a hard time accepting when you choose not to live your life in a box or following the status quo or following the mold. And so a lot of times people are well intentioned. They'll try to say, hey, maybe you should slow down, especially when you hit a bump. Anyone who knows anything about starting and running a business knows that it is not a straight linear path. It is very much like a roller coaster. There are going to be a lot of highs, but then there are also going to be many, many lows that sometimes you're in those lows for years, months, and it's only by the grace of God or by chance or by you strategizing that you get out of that bump. And so when you're vulnerable like that, hearing someone say, I'll just give up and go back to your 9 to 5 can be enticing. But then when you look at the grand scheme of things, you gave up on your purpose, you gave up on building a beautiful thing because it was hard. And you gave up because you listened to someone who is not destined to walk that path and who therefore does not have the experience and is not equipped with the tools to help you navigate those hard times. Which is why I say that it's important to keep things quiet and to connect with people who are energetically aligned with you and who are on the same or similar path or who have previously gone through what you've gone through. Because you cannot be someone who speaks French and expect to have a conversation with someone who doesn't speak French and expect them to understand. You do not speak the same language, and so therefore you're wasting your time trying to get this person to understand where you're coming from. It doesn't mean that that person's Spanish speaking is any less than French. It just simply means that you do not speak the same language, and so you should therefore go to someone who speaks French who can communicate with you. The same thing applies with life. Rather than going back to the past and things that are familiar because it's maybe a security blanket for you, it feels safe, you need to get connected with people who are on the same path with you. And if you cannot get connected with those people, just stay still, stay focused, and continue to work on what you need to work on, and the answers will come to you. Those people who are meant to be in your life will come to you. You are energetically giving up space, letting go of what no longer serves you, and you're allowing space for those who are energetically aligned with you to come into your life and, get you to the next level that you need to be at. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think about this one down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.